1. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. And we know what happens when the church is persecuted. I just told you. What's the formula? Persecution equals growth. That's right. So bring it on. He had James, the brother of John, put to death. There was a James who was a brother to John, but it's not the James who wrote the Bible, so don't get confused. When he saw that this pleased the Jews, then he proceeded to seize Peter also. Big deal. This happened during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and after arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers. So that would be how many soldiers?
16.
Thank you. Way to go. 6. Nobody had to get their calculator on their cell phone. 16 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was, what were they doing? What does it say? The church was earnestly praying to God for him. Thank you. You did a good job. You can take it back upstairs. She did that herself. Okay, so the church was earnestly praying. Okay, last week I was driving around and I heard this pastor. His name is Crawford Loritz. Oh, and I wrote in my notes. Last week I was driving around redeeming the time. Remember when we talked about that? I was redeeming the time. I was renewing my mind. I wasn't listening to just any old thing. I was listening to a pastor in my car, redeeming the time. So those are things to think about when you're being disciplined for the purposes of godliness. If you want to grow in the Lord, you got to saturate yourself with godly things, okay? So I was listening to a pastor. His name is Crawford Loritz, and he came on and he was telling a story about a time when his family needed money and they were all out of options. And they were praying, they were earnestly praying, and some man calls him on the phone and he says, Pastor Loritz, I have this money that I really don't need, and I'd like to give it to you. And he said, the pastor then said, we had been earnestly praying to see the Lord's deliverance. And when he did, I was shocked and I was blown away by it. And he said, but then the Lord said to me, what did you expect? And it reminded me of this passage, and we're going to read, where the church kind of gets a kick in the teeth, like, what did you expect? You were earnestly praying that Peter would be delivered. What did you expect? Can you go back upstairs with Daddy? Okay, you're going to have to go sit down in your chair then. And so I'll just tell you a little brief story real quick. I have friends who got the call to go to Vietnam, and that's been about 18 months ago, and she and I went in February to Vietnam together. I'm sure Madison and Lindsay remember that. And their house has been up for sale for 1 year, and her husband has always said that they would not go as missionaries to Vietnam unless the house sold. So they had said that they would leave in January, but never set the date because the house had not sold. And so when we were there in February, she and I were trying to kind of look at houses and get a framework for what they should do. And we just decided while we were there that they really can't make plans until they set a date on the books, like we're going to Vietnam on this day. So when we got back from that trip, she and her husband discussed it, and they decided that they would go on June the 27th. Okay? And they really needed the house to sell. They had enough money to pay 1 month's mortgage from Vietnam. So they just kept praying, but as time drew near, it just got harder and harder. If you'll go upstairs. Take it upstairs. Thanks. And it just got harder and harder. And about 2 weeks before they left, which they left today, she called me and she just basically broke down and just said, are we crazy? We don't have a plan B. God is just going to have to sell this house. And the only thing I could think of to say to her was, you're never in a bad place if all you're doing is relying on the Lord. There's, in the Old Testament, you'll constantly read where God says, stop reaching for the arm of the flesh and look for the mighty hand of the Lord. Stop reaching for what you can do and rest in what you know that I can do. Okay? And God just challenges his people. And that is still his challenge today for us. Is don't think about what you can do. When your checkbook is on E and only God can come through for you and you've done everything the right way, sometimes you just have to rely on the Lord, and that's exactly where you need to be, okay? So we have this conversation, and I'm like, sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, you're in a great place if all you're doing is relying on the Lord. So I had no idea what that meant. So anyway, 2 weeks goes by. Thursday night, they're 5 days away from leaving or 4 days away from leaving. We're cleaning out the house. They're getting their suitcases packed. They're leaving on June the 27th, which is today. And Friday morning, the house was supposed to show, but that really wasn't a big deal because the house has shown lots of times, maybe 25 times over the last year. And so at 10 a.m., this man came to their house, and he looked around, and he basically told them that he was a cash-only buyer and that he needed to go get his wife to see if she liked the house, but he was very interested in it. So this was the first potential bite that they had had on their house. Okay, Friday, they got Saturday, Sunday, Monday. They leave Monday. So Friday, this man comes. At 12:30 the same day, he brings his wife and his children, and they loved the house. They are also believers, and so there was just an instant drawing there. And that same day that they first looked at the house, they brought a check and they bought the house. One day. One day. No real estate agent, no home inspection, no termite letter. God sold their house in one day. And Christina's in the real estate business, and does that ever happen?
I want to buy her like that. That doesn't happen. No.
That never happens. That never happens. It's a complete and total miracle. And it's so it said to me, for this we have been earnestly praying for God to confirm the call that he gave to my friends, for God to show himself in a mighty way, for God to deliver them from this house. For this we have earnestly prayed. What did we expect? But the Lord to move in a mighty way, and he did. And so as we read on, the church is earnestly praying because where is Peter?
Jail.
Guarded by how many soldiers?
60.
That's right. So the night before Herod was going to bring him to trial, Peter was asleep between two soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance, and suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell, and he struck Peter on the side and said, "Quick, get up." And the chains fell off Peter's wrists, and then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals," and Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. And Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was just seeing another vision. So they passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. And then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know that without a doubt the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were anticipating." When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Remember, because they were earnestly praying. So Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant girl named Rhoda came up to the door and answered. And when she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed. She ran back without opening it and exclaimed,